Today I'll be installing the TURBRO Greenland mini split air conditioner. This unit also has a built-in heat pump, so it'll maintain your home's temperature throughout the entire year. It's got many great features, like app and remote control, and it can effectively cool, heat, or dehumidify your home. We'll begin this installation with the indoor unit. Make sure you save this piece of cardboard. It's highly important when mounting the bracket. Here are the footrests for the outdoor unit and the cable that sends power to the indoor unit. You'll get two water drain hoses, one for the indoor unit and one for the outdoor unit. This mini split AC has an amazing energy guide rating and is 35% more efficient than other units. The AC is easy to maintenance. The top filter comes off with ease and is a breeze to clean. If we take a look at the back of the unit, we'll find the mounting bracket that's being held on by this one screw. Remove this and put the bracket to the side. We'll be installing this shortly. You'll also find the coolant lines and the drain hose here at the back of the unit. Be very careful with these. The wall bracket can be installed with a variety of different screws, depending on your wall's construction. Place the cardboard bracket template up on the wall and make sure that all of your clearances are good. You should have approximately 8 inches of clearance on the top of the unit and approximately 14 inches on either side. Once the template is level, we can mark the screw holes with a marker. Make sure your marks are easy to read so that all your screw holes line up with the bracket. My walls are made out of brick, so I have to pre-drill each and every hole. If you're installing into a traditional wall, make sure to identify at least one stud to drill into. If you can't hit a stud, make sure that you use drywall anchors that are properly rated for the weight of this unit. I'm using concrete screws that are specifically made for this type of wall. Once the bracket is installed, we can drill out the hole for the coolant lines and the drain hose. My walls are over a foot thick and made from solid brick, so I'm bringing out the rotary hammer to get this job done. Once the pilot hole is drilled, we can chisel out the rest of the hole with the spade bit. The next step in this installation is to install the power wires to the indoor unit. We need to remove this one Phillips screw from the electrical box cover in order to gain access to the terminal block. Next, we can run all of the wires through the back of the unit and up to the terminal block. Unscrew this cable clamp so we can run our wires underneath it. It also helps to loosen the screws on each terminal before installing the wires. The yellow wire will go on terminal 1, the white wire will go on terminal 2, the black wire will go on terminal 3, and the green wire will go on the terminal marked with the ground symbol. The ground wire has a round connection, so the terminal screw will have to be removed completely in order to install it properly. Once all the wires have been secured, we can reinstall the cable clamp and the electrical box cover. The next thing you want to do is wrap the electric cable, coolant lines, and drain hose nice and tight. We'll be running these lines through the wall to the outside unit. Wrapping the lines like this will protect them and let them pass through the wall easily. Start by feeding the electrical wire through the hole. Be extremely careful with the coolant lines. You don't want to bend them during this step. It helps to have a second hand when lifting this unit up onto the wall. The unit will hook onto the top of the bracket and snap on at the bottom. Now we can install the outdoor unit. This unit is pretty heavy, and a team lift is recommended. Put the drain hose, coolant lines, and all other parts aside for later. Make sure that you have a suitable location to install the outdoor unit. You'll need at least 12 inches of clearance from the back of the unit to your home, and over 20 inches on either side. Here's a quick look at the TURBRO Greenland inverter. It puts out over 12,000 BTUs of cooling power and runs off a single pole 20 amp breaker. It uses R410A refrigerant and is completely waterproof with an IPX4 rating. You will need to purchase some electrical wire in order to connect the outdoor unit to a power source. I'm using this liquid-tight conduit with 12 gauge wire. The first step for the outdoor unit installation is to install this drain hose at the bottom of the unit. Next, we'll install these 4 rubber feet. They help protect the unit against excessive vibration, and they also make the unit extremely quiet. Use a Phillips screwdriver to remove these 3 screws on the wiring cover. We're going to run the electrical wires coming from the indoor unit the same way we did before. Simply push them through this waterproof gasket and run them under the wiring clamp. Connect the ground wire to the green screw at the bottom of the base, then connect each wire the same way we did before, starting with the yellow wire on 1, the white wire on 2, and the black wire on 3. Now we can connect the main power wire to the electrical box. This liquid-tight conduit is really easy to use and will provide the safest connection for your outdoor unit. The bare copper wire is your ground, connected to the other green screw at the base. We're going to connect the white wire to the N on the terminal block and the black wire to the L. The N stands for neutral and the L stands for line, which is the hot wire coming from your electrical box. Reinstall the electrical box cover with the 3 Phillips screws. The next step will be to install a new 20 amp breaker into your electrical box. If you're unsure about this, please hire an electrician for this step of the process. It's extremely dangerous, but a simple job if you know what you're doing. Start by killing the power to the panel completely by turning off the main breaker. Carefully remove this cover plate. Be sure not to touch any wires while you're inside. Make sure that the breaker is the same brand as the panel and that there's enough space for it. Check and see if your electrical wire can reach the breaker. Then knock out a 1/2 inch hole so we can pass the wiring through. There are designated knockout holes at the bottom of each electrical panel, specifically for this. Just make sure you knock out a 1/2 inch and not a 3/4. Tighten the conduit securely, then strip back your wires and prepare them for installation. This black wire will connect to your new breaker. The white and ground wires will connect to the neutral bar inside your panel. You can either snap in the breaker first, then connect the wire, or connect the wire first, then snap in the breaker. I like to connect the wire first because it's a little bit easier. The piece on the breaker closest to the wire will snap in first. Then press the top of the breaker over till it clicks onto the panel. Make sure you check all of your wiring at this time. If everything's good, we can knock out this spot for the new breaker and reinstall the panel cover. Now we can install the coolant lines. Carefully bend these down towards the outside unit. The system is pre-charged with coolant to ensure that there's no leaks before installation. You should hear the coolant evacuate the system at this time. Remove the protective caps and align the 2 flare nuts. Install this as much as you can by hand. Then we'll use 2 spanner wrenches to get this to the right torque. Do the same thing with the low pressure coolant line. It's a little bit bigger, but the same concept applies. Wrap all the lines like we did before, but make sure to leave the drain hose exposed. We need access to this at all times. Connect this second drain hose to the one coming from the inside unit. Make sure you tape the two hoses together at this connection. The coolant hose cover is held on by this one Phillips screw. Remove the protective covers and connect your two coolant lines. These are flared connections, so you don't need Teflon tape. Just make sure you tighten them to the correct torque. Remember to install all of your connections by hand first to ensure that they don't strip. The last step in this installation process is to vacuum the system and release the refrigerant. You will need a vacuum pump and a gauge set for this step. Connect the middle line on your gauge set to the vacuum pump. Then connect the first line on the gauge set to the low pressure service port. You may need a special adapter to connect this hose to the port on your AC. Fortunately, my vacuum pump came with one, but they're pretty easy to find. Turn on the vacuum pump and open the low pressure port on the gauge set. This should begin to vacuum out the AC lines, and you'll see the gauge read a -0.1 MPa. Run the vacuum for at least 15 minutes, then close the low pressure port. The reading on the gauge should continue to read -0.1. If the gauge goes to 0, then there's a leak in the system somewhere, and you'll have to identify it. If your system held a vacuum, then we can release a little bit of refrigerant into the system to do a leak check. Open the low pressure valve for 5 seconds, then close it right back. You'll hear a small amount of refrigerant enter the lines. Next, you need to quickly remove the hose from the gauge set so that very little refrigerant leaves the system. Replace the protective cap, and now it's time to do a leak test. There are a variety of different tools to do a leak test, but I just use soapy water. If there are no leaks, then we can fully open the low and high pressure valves and release the refrigerant into the system. Replace all of the protective caps, and we'll do one final leak test. As you can see here, I'm simply brushing some soapy water onto my connections. If there's a leak, it'll bubble up. No leaks have been detected, so we can reinstall the coolant hose cover and send power to the unit. Simply turn on the new breaker, and your AC is ready to go. Make sure there's nothing blocking the air intake at the top of the unit, and that it's nice and clean. This AC comes with a really convenient remote control. We're going to install the mount on the wall really quickly, then try out the unit. This AC unit is working phenomenally. It can manage up to 750 square feet of space and has both heating and cooling. In this next video, I'm going to highlight all the great features of the TURBRO Greenland mini split.